Good evening, Patriots. First and foremost, I need to give a huge thank you to RedPill78 for the shout out on Twitter and YouTube. I believe the video he shared is information everyone deserves to know, and I'm so glad it's getting the reach that it is now getting. I appreciate you, Red Pill, and all other Patriots. I'm so grateful also for a shout out by Sainted Anon on one of his videos. This was very unexpected and unrelated to the hat tip from RedPill78. So I have to say, today was a good day. I do hope that you all check out other videos I've made. I have one that's based on the book Sheep No More that Q has alluded to. I have another one that is called Legislating Equality Will Destroy a Free Country, based off of Yuri Bezmenov, a KGB defector that presented that information in the early 80s. So a lot of interesting stuff, other good information. It may help you, it may not. Check it out and let me know. Today I will talk about what the wall is being built for. Before you decide that you know what I'm going to say, please stay and listen a while and determine if that is maybe not the case. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video, and click the bell so you get all the notifications of new posts. I'm grateful you are here because, as I always say, you are what matters. So let's get into this. It is my understanding that the wall on the southern border is imperative for a number of reasons, including but not exclusive to ending human trafficking, ending the smuggling of children to sell off to pedophiles and pedivores, ending the allowance of dangerous gangs and terrorists, ending illegal drug trade, and decreasing the wasted funds we pay annually for illegal immigrants living off of our system. I also believe by building this wall, we are creating a solid defense against possible war with China. Here is some of the information I gathered. And folks, I'm going to include the links for everything I've looked up, and you can see that in the description box at the end of this video. And what I will tell you on this first one is that I paraphrased it from the article I was reading, and you can go look at the article yourself. This comes from a 2012 anonymous man who worked in Defense Signals Directorate as part of the Australian arm of the Echelon system, mostly just bureaucratic paper shuffling. While intelligence gathering was not strictly his job, he was in regular contact with American CIA and NSA personnel working out of Pine Gap. Pine Gap is the commonly used name for an Australian Earth station approximately southwest of the town of Alice Springs, Northern Territory, in the center of Australia, which is operated by both Australia and the United States. Since 1988, it has been officially called the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap. Previously, it was known as Joint Defense Space Research Facility. Makes me think of Five Eyes. What about you? The rumors he told in 2012 about Chinese troops in Mexico would bring back one of his favorite stories, and so I thought I would share with you. The way he tells it is, quote, for several years before 2012, the Chinese have had secret treaties in place with the Mexican government for the establishment of military bases in northern Mexico. Over a dozen, maybe more. Huge, sprawling bases in the desert, each one designed to accommodate an entire Chinese army of 50 to 60,000 men, a group army. They have barracks, command centers, airfields, repair facilities, the works, all connected by rail and highway to ports on the coast. But these bases, they're all empty. We call them bear bases, manned by a skeleton crew of maintenance staff and security. Each base is stocked with a mountain of tanks, trucks, pontoon bridges, munitions, and fuel, but it's all just sitting in warehouses and bunkers. Over 10,000 armored vehicles alone, and they have thousands of people over there whose only job is to clean the artillery and turn over the engines sometimes, and they do this all day, every day. The American intelligence agencies know all about it, of course. They always have. They watch it all from spy satellites, Five Eyes, and people on the ground. And the Chinese know that the Americans know, but they keep building and expanding these bases anyway. See, the idea is, if, for example, a crisis erupts over Taiwan, the Chinese know that even if they capture the island, America will still have the power to carry on the war in the air and sea, just like with Japan 70 years ago. Chinese ports will be blockaded, and Chinese industry will grind to a halt. So the strategy they came up with is a sort of massive-scale hostage exchange. In the tense time leading up to war, which they expect following a Taiwanese declaration of independence, and side note, as for us now in 2019, as we know, in our case, it was a deep state plant of Hillary Clinton. But back to his story. The Chinese army hopes to ship and fly the vast majority of their armored and mechanized forces into these Mexican staging bases. It won't be like Desert Shield in '91 when America took 6 months to build up enough forces to invade Iraq. No, because all their gear and supplies are already there and waiting for them. They just need to move in the 500,000 to 1 million troops to man it and make the push over the Rio Grande. The strategy is supposed to be to roll up on these American superhighway systems in Texas and the Midwest and capture as much territory between the Mississippi and the Rockies in as little time as possible. Just bypass the big cities and push right up to the Canadian border, if they can manage it. Then once their momentum peters out, they consolidate the front lines and besiege or capture all the American cities that are now in their zone of control. Tens of millions of American citizens under occupation and all the Texan oil production secure. Then the New World Order and all that is included with that begins. Another side note, see my video Legislating Equality Will Destroy a Free Nation for a lot of good information on exactly what he's talking about here. So back to him. Crazy, huh? The American spooks think so too. For this strategy to even stand a chance of success, the Chinese have to have a few weeks to get their troops across the Pacific Ocean, and the Americans reckon they can shut down the transport convoys in a heartbeat if the president of the day has the backbone to start the shooting first. If not, all those Chinese armored divisions still have to face the American Air Force over open country, and I don't know how they expect to counter that. It'd be a massacre. In the tensions leading up to the war, the Pentagon plans to evacuate everyone within 200 kilometers of the Mexican border and just turn the whole area into a bombing range. The American intel guys call it the Million-Man Death March. And if they somehow did ground the Air Force, thanks to chips in our military aircrafts with remote control, I suppose it's just a Texan National Guard, and I call them speed bumps under the CHICOM, which means Chinese Communist tanks. As to what the Mexicans expect to get from all this, supposedly they have been promised the return of old lost territories like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and I don't know about California, but the real motivation is bribes, or as we know, blackmail, with Hillary Clinton having the keys to the internet if you watched my Q video. Massive Chinese bribes from the Mexican president all the way down, right to the local cops and the drug cartels probably, to keep away from these bases. Like I said, the intel guys know everything. They know that the Mexican government doesn't really think a war will come of it. No one does except the old Cold War warriors, as he puts it. Nobody wants a war. The Chinese are too busy getting rich, and the Americans are putting huge pressure on Taiwan not to do anything stupid. It's just a big game of bluff. But I suppose people said that before World War I and World War II, huh? So that ends that gentleman's recount, and I found an article around the same time from America's Quarterly. It gives a lot of reason to disbelieve the hype, which tells you that there was a lot of other reports leaking about this kind of information that the anonymous Australian man was speaking to. I will put a link to this article in the description box below, and I'm going to go through this article a little bit with you. So in this article from America's Quarterly, they addressed this fear of China lying in wait in Latin America. Quote, one headline in the Asia Times Online proclaimed, China is on the march in Latin America. Another, in Military Review, warned of China's threat to the United States. Quote, in Uncle Sam's backyard, China's military influence in Latin America, unquote. Such language underlines fears about China becoming a military rival to the U.S., or worse, undermining U.S. security in a region defined in the past by the Monroe Doctrine. So that's the little quip I'm going to read of that article. And what is the Monroe Doctrine? The Monroe Doctrine was a United States policy of opposing European colonialism in the Americas beginning in 1823. It stated that further efforts by European nations to take control of any independent state in North or South America would be viewed as a manifestation of an unfriendly disposition toward the United States. At the same time, the doctrine noted that the U.S. would recognize and not interfere with existing European colonies, nor meddle in the internal concerns of European countries. The doctrine was issued on December 2, 1823, at a time when nearly all Latin American colonies of Spain and Portugal had achieved or were at the point of gaining independence from the Portuguese and Spanish empires. That comes from Wikipedia. So this America's Quarterly, or as I will now call it, AQ, article goes on to list reasons why China would never want to go to war with the U.S., including what is called the 2011 Harmonious Mission in the Caribbean. It should be noted that China was implementing things like this as a show of faith, but this barge I'm about to talk about sounds a little too FEMA-like for my taste. Quote, the 14,000 tons displacement vessel is 178 meters long with a total crew of 415, including 107 specifically involved in sanitary operations. The current operation has been named Harmonious Mission. Although China's robust military buildup may make its neighbors nervous, it is also increasingly using the army as part of its charm offensive abroad. In effect, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, in a cultural shift for an institution known for strident nationalism and unbending loyalty to the Communist Party, is expanding overseas aid missions and military exchanges in a major way. The diplomatic push is part of a larger global campaign by the Chinese government, which aims to portray China as a responsible rising power while softening the image of the 2.3 million member military and boosting its ties with other nations and forces, end quote. And good luck finding any photos of this vessel, because I did not. I don't do a Google search. I search with other, like DuckDuckGo, but I did an internet search and I could not find any picture that I could claim could be attributed to that vessel. The America's Quarterly, or AQ, article then goes on to let us know that Latin Americans would be unlikely to aid in such activity because, quote, the alarmist reporting ignores the Latin American perspective. Latin Americans are not simple bystanders. They seek to engage China in order to understand the nature and extent of China's power and influence and its effect on their national interests and foreign policies. They also want to keep their options open for acquiring military equipment at an affordable price and technology transfers for co-production or independent production. They are also aware of the risks of acquiring a motley mix of systems from various nations, a prospect that makes maintenance expensive and readiness problematic, unquote. But wait, I remember a group called La Raza that wanted land back in the South they believed belonged to them. Let's see. Oh, here it is. La Raza's plan to divide America by removing the American Southwest and creating Aslan, which is Soros-backed. So this will be an article from Dave Hodges and the Common Sense Show. The concept of Aslan has been sanctioned by the UN. This is the same UN that is transporting military-grade vehicles within the United States. This, too, is a violation of our immigration laws, not to mention national security. These groups have historically taught that Colorado, California, Arizona, Texas, Utah, New Mexico, Oregon, and parts of Washington state make up an area known as Aztlan, a fictional ancestral homeland of the Aztecs before Europeans arrived in North America. Miguel Perez of the Cal State Northridge's Mecca chapter stated, "The ultimate ideology is the liberation of Aztlan. Communism would be closest to it. Once Aztlan is established, ethnic cleansing would commence. Non-Chicanos would have to be expelled. Opposition groups would be quashed because you have to keep power." Those were the words from Miguel Perez. The National Council of La Raza and its allies in public office make no repudiation of the radical Mecca and its positions. As recently as 2003, La Raza was actively funding Mecca, according to federal tax records. However, since La Raza began to receive federal funds, La Raza has adopted a less militant stand, and at least publicly, where they say they no longer support Reconquista de Aztlan. However, when one examines where proposed federal money was designed to go under S-744 and to go into the pockets of La Raza and Mecca, it is impossible to believe that at its core, La Raza does not truly support the concept of Aztlan. This is where Aztlan started, and now it is exploding. Even more disturbing was the account of Preston's insider source, who attended some of the CalExit meetings. While in attendance, the source heard a pointed discussion about the cartel's intel to kill white people. The idea was allegedly put forward by the cartels and was proclaimed in front of 3 members of the Obama administration. So, folks, that comes again from Dave Hodges' Common Sense Show, and he has a much more detailed article from that show, or you can listen to the show talking about different areas that are trying to secede, which is exactly what the globalists would want to see: no more United States. We're seeing this played out today, even in the southern border, obviously, with California, New Mexico, with the governor who is pulling troops from the southern border, and the right-wing people are now demanding impeachment, which will probably not happen. We're seeing this in Arizona, and we almost saw it in Texas, and Beta is still down there trying to pull down our existing walls. But I want to get back to this AQ article that talks about, again, why China would not possibly be building or using South America or Latin America or Mexico to put its artillery, trucks, all that stuff. So back to the article. U.S. officials are not publicly concerned about China's military activities. Frank Mora, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere Affairs, stated in 2009 that while the U.S. stands for transparency, China's arms and technology transfers are standard in the international community, and that some of the equipment can help Latin American governments improve security and counter drug trafficking. Henry Kissinger, of all people, in his latest book on China, calls for the new U.S. relationship with China to be built on strategic trust. The same advice applies to thinking about the evolving ties between China and Latin America. Oh, thanks, Henry Kissinger. We should all be listening to him, right? So that's the end of that part. I wanted to say, we all now know Hillary Clinton was selling information to China like mad. Dianne Feinstein, who I like to call Di-Fi Chai, was working with them firsthand for many, many years. And we also know that the Chinese implemented chips into our computers, phones, military weapons, tanks, and aircraft, and probably a lot of other technology, with remote-controlled chips with the aid of Jeff Bezos. If you didn't know that, you can message me questions through my Patreon or leave a comment. I'll be more apt to see and respond to Patreon messages more quickly as I get specific notifications for that. So just to summarize what I would like everyone to get out of this video is that the wall is definitely about stopping human trafficking, drug smuggling, and importation of cartel and terrorists. It also needs to be built to defend against war, much the way the Great Wall was built to keep out the Huns. I speculate that Trump will happily build a steel barrier to appease the left. I also believe he plans to continue to use the national emergency to get more funding than the original $5 billion he asked for, as Mick Mulvaney made clear in an interview, stating that with the national emergency, President Trump would be able to accrue far more than the $5 billion and obtain it legally. This would ensure the army of engineers would put up the steel barrier first, and then, in my opinion, President Trump would have enough money and the presidential ability to build a concrete wall around the steel barrier, ensuring a strong and difficult to penetrate wall. And of course, some will say, oh come on, they'll still build tunnels or they'll find ways over the wall. That is true, but that wall would significantly slow people down in the instance of a war. So that is the end of today's video. Thanks for watching and sticking out the video in its entirety. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and click the notification bell for all notifications of new posts. And as always, folks, you are what matters. So be blessed and have a great day. Until next time. We're seeing this in Arizona, and we almost saw it in Texas, and Beta is still down there trying to pull down our existing walls. But I want to get back to this AQ article that talks about, again, why China would not possibly be building or using South America or Latin America or Mexico to put its artillery, trucks, all that stuff. So back to the article. U.S. officials are not publicly concerned about China's military activities. Frank Mora, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Western Hemisphere Affairs, stated in 2009 that while the U.S. stands for transparency, China's arms and technology transfers are standard in the international community, and that some of the equipment can help Latin American governments improve security and counter drug trafficking. Henry Kissinger, of all people, in his latest book on China, calls for the new U.S. relationship with China to be built on strategic trust. The same advice applies to thinking about the evolving ties between China and Latin America. Oh, thanks, Henry Kissinger. We should all be listening to him, right? So that's the end of that part. I wanted to say, we all now know Hillary Clinton was selling information to China like mad. Dianne Feinstein, who I like to call Di-Fi Chai, was working with them firsthand for many, many years. And we also know that the Chinese implemented chips into our computers, phones, military weapons, tanks, and aircraft, and probably a lot of other technology with remote-controlled chips with the aid of Jeff Bezos. If you didn't know that, you can message me questions through my Patreon or leave a comment. I'll be more apt to see and respond to Patreon messages more quickly as I get specific notifications for that. What I would like everyone to get out of this video is that the wall is definitely about stopping human trafficking, drug smuggling, and importation of cartel and terrorists. It also needs to be built to defend against war, much the way the Great Wall was built to keep out the Huns. I speculate that Trump will happily build a steel barrier to appease the left. I also believe he plans to continue to use the national emergency money to get more funding. I also believe he plans to continue to use the national emergency to get more funding than the original $5 billion he asked for, as Mick Mulvaney made clear in an interview, stating that with the national emergency, President Trump would be able to accrue far more than the $5 billion and obtain it legally. This would ensure the Army of Engineers would put up the steel barrier first, and then Trump would have enough money and the presidential ability to build a concrete wall around the steel barrier, ensuring a strong and difficult to penetrate wall. Some will say, oh, come on, Aaron, they will still build tunnels, they will find ways over the wall. That is true, but the wall will significantly slow them down. Hey folks, thanks for watching and sticking out this video in its entirety. Do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and click the notification bell for all notifications of new posts. God bless Patriots, and good night.